I always believed life followed a predictable path. Study hard, build a career, fall in love, get married, and start a family. It was a plan I had followed diligently, believing it would lead to happiness. And for a long time, it did. I met Ryan in graduate school. He was smart, kind, and deeply committed to our relationship. We built a life together, fueled by shared dreams and mutual respect. We got married, moved into a beautiful home, and climbed the ladder of success in our careers. To anyone looking in from the outside, we had the perfect marriage. But beneath the surface, something had begun to change. At 35, I wasn't old, but I was starting to feel a disconnect, a quiet restlessness that grew louder every day. Ryan had begun talking about starting a family. It was the logical next step in our well-planned life. But the thought of diapers, sleepless nights, and giving up my independence made my stomach churn. Was I really ready for that? Or was I just convincing myself that I should be? The realization came slowly at first. Little moments that should have made me happy, but instead left me feeling trapped. And then, the night of the company dinner happened. That was the night everything started to change. That was the night I met Ethan. And that was the night I unknowingly took the first step toward a decision I would regret for the rest of my life. The night of the company dinner arrived, and I found myself hesitating in front of the mirror longer than usual. My black dress hugged my figure in all the right places. My makeup was flawless, and my hair fell in soft waves over my shoulders. I looked good, but something still felt off. I sighed, reminding myself that this was just another corporate event. Nothing special. Just a night of forced small talk, polite laughter, and pretending to enjoy a gathering that I had no real interest in. Ryan wasn't coming. He was working late again. Lately, that had become his new normal. His dedication to his job was something I once admired, but recently it only reminded me of how often I ate dinner alone. As I arrived at the venue, the sound of laughter and clinking glasses filled the air. The restaurant was buzzing with energy, but I felt disconnected from it all. Most of my colleagues were younger, fresh out of university, full of life and excitement. I, on the other hand, was starting to feel like I had somehow skipped the stage where life felt fun. I took my seat at the table, sipping on my wine, watching the room instead of engaging in conversation. And that's when I noticed him. Ethan. Tall, confident, and effortlessly charming. He was a name I had heard around the office, but never had the chance to interact with directly. He wasn't from my department, but his reputation had already made its way to me. Smooth, charismatic, and incredibly easy to talk to. When he walked in, he was immediately surrounded by people, all eager to be in his company. He had a presence that demanded attention without even trying. I wasn't the only one watching him. Women from my department giggled as they whispered among themselves, stealing glances at him like schoolgirls with a crush. I smirked to myself. It was amusing how obvious they were. But then something unexpected happened. He noticed me. His gaze met mine from across the room. Not just a passing glance. He held my stare, his lips curling into a knowing smirk. I quickly looked away, my heart beating a little faster. Why did that just happen? I wasn't some shy girl experiencing her first crush. I was a married woman. I had no business getting flustered over a look from another man. And yet, I felt something. something I hadn't felt in a long time. Excitement. I tried to ignore him, but it became impossible when he sat down next to me. Not a fan of office parties? He asked, his voice smooth, carrying just the right amount of amusement. I turned to him, trying to appear unaffected. Is it that obvious? He smiled, a slow, deliberate smile. A little. You look like you'd rather be anywhere else. I chuckled, relaxing slightly. You're not wrong. For the next half hour, we talked effortlessly. He was witty, intelligent, and surprisingly easy to connect with. He told me about his move to the city, his previous jobs, and even a few office stories that had me laughing more than I had in weeks. It was strange. I felt lighter in his presence. Like I wasn't just Ryan's wife or a corporate professional, but a woman who could still laugh, flirt, and feel interesting. At one point, I caught myself leaning closer, completely engrossed in the conversation. That's when he said it. You know, I think I figured you out. I raised an eyebrow. Oh? And what exactly have you figured out? He smirked, taking a sip of his drink before replying. You're restless. His words hit harder than they should have. For a split second, I felt exposed. I opened my mouth to protest, but before I could, he leaned in slightly. You have everything. A career, a marriage, stability, but deep down, you're still searching for something. Am I wrong? I should have laughed it off. I should have brushed it aside. But I didn't, because he wasn't wrong. Instead, I met his gaze and whispered, "What makes you so sure?" His smirk widened. Because I see it in your eyes. By the time the dinner was over, the atmosphere had shifted. Something had awakened inside me. As I stood to leave, Ethan followed me outside. He held my coat open for me, and as I slipped into it, he leaned close enough for me to feel his breath near my ear. "What's your type?" he asked playfully. I laughed, shaking my head. "Why do you want to know?" Without missing a beat, he grinned. "Because mine is someone like you." My breath hitched. He winked, stepped back, and casually walked away, as if he hadn't just thrown my entire world off balance. I stood frozen, watching him disappear into the night. I told myself it was just harmless flirtation, that it meant nothing. But I knew I was lying to myself. That night, I went home with my husband, but for the first time, I fantasized about someone else. And that was the beginning of the end. That night, when I walked into our home, everything felt the same, yet completely different. Ryan was already in bed, exhausted from work. The house was quiet, familiar, safe, but something inside me felt off. As I changed into my nightwear, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. My lips were still curved in the faintest of smiles, a remnant of my conversation with Ethan. I quickly shook my head, trying to erase the feeling creeping over me. It was just a harmless conversation. But as I climbed into bed beside Ryan, my thoughts betrayed me. Ryan reached for me instinctively in his sleep, wrapping an arm around my waist like he always did. His warmth was comforting, but as my eyes fluttered shut, it wasn't his face I saw. It was Ethan's. The way he smirked when he spoke, the confidence in his voice, the way he made me feel like I was more than just a wife lost in routine. A quiet thrill ran through me at the memory, and guilt followed instantly. I turned to Ryan, pressing myself closer against him, hoping his familiar touch would erase the unfamiliar ache inside me. But when he whispered, "I love you, Cassie," against my hair, something inside me shattered. Because for the first time in 12 years of marriage, I had let someone else into my mind, and that terrified me. The following days were a blur of routine. Wake up, go to work, come home, dinner with Ryan, small talk, sleep, and yet, every moment in between, Ethan lingered in my thoughts. His words, his voice, the way he saw through me so easily. I tried to push it away. I told myself it was just a passing thought. But then, on Monday afternoon, everything changed. I was drowning in emails when a soft knock on my cubicle made me look up. Ethan, leaning casually against the doorway, arms crossed, that same knowing smirk on his face. "Hey, Cassie," he said smoothly. "Busy?" I swallowed hard, my heart suddenly racing. "A little. What's up?" "Thought you might want a break," he said, tilting his head toward the exit. "Lunch?" I hesitated. I should say no. I should make an excuse. But my lips betrayed me. "Yeah. Okay." He smiled, stepping aside to let me pass. "Great. Let's go." As I grabbed my coat and followed him out, I ignored the voice screaming inside my head. Because deep down, I already knew. This wasn't just lunch. This was the first real step towards something I couldn't take back. We ended up at a quiet bistro near the office. The conversation flowed effortlessly, just like the night of the party. He made me laugh. He listened. And every time our eyes met, the air between us shifted. At some point, I caught myself leaning in closer without realizing it. It felt natural. Like I had known him for longer than just a few days. Like this was something I had been missing. And then, as we walked back to the office, it happened. Right before I could step out of his car, he leaned in. It wasn't a passionate, overpowering kiss. It wasn't forceful. It was just a soft brush of lips. Quick. Barely there. But enough to make my breath hitch. Enough to make my stomach flip. Enough to change everything. I should have pulled away. I should have been angry. But instead, I sat there, touching my lips, feeling more alive than I had in years. This is wrong. I knew it. But as Ethan smirked and said, "See you soon, Cassie," before driving off, I knew something else too. I didn't want it to stop. The moment I walked back into the office, guilt wrapped around my throat like a noose. I had kissed another man. No, he had kissed me. And I had let it happen. As I sat at my desk, my fingers hovered over my keyboard, but my mind was somewhere else. The heat of Ethan's lips still lingered on mine, and no matter how much I tried to push the memory away, it clung to me. I convinced myself it wasn't real cheating. It was a mistake, a slip, something I could bury and forget. But when I got home that night and Ryan greeted me with his usual tired smile, the guilt burned hotter. He kissed my forehead, wrapped his arms around me, and told me about his day. And I just stood there, nodding, smiling, pretending. Dinner was quiet. I stirred my food, barely eating, my thoughts elsewhere. Ryan didn't seem to notice. Or maybe he was just used to me being distant. It wasn't until we lay in bed that night, his arm draped over my waist, that I felt it. The weight of what I had done. The space between us felt larger than ever. And yet, even with him so close, my mind was on someone else. The next few days, I did my best to avoid Ethan. I told myself that if I just stayed away, this feeling would fade, that I could fix things. But then, on Thursday, my phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. "Ethan, you free after work? I need your help with something." I stared at the message, my heart pounding. I could say no. I could ignore it. I could go home to my husband and pretend like nothing had ever happened. But my fingers moved before I could think. Me. What do you need help with? His reply was almost immediate. Ethan, interior design advice, just moved into a new place, could use your eye for details, an innocent excuse. A perfectly normal reason to meet. But we both knew what this really was. That night, when Ryan asked if I had any plans, I lied so easily it scared me. Just a quick stop after work. A friend needs help with something. And just like that, I had made my choice. Ethan's condo was breathtaking, sleek, modern, high-rise windows that framed the city skyline. I stepped inside, taking in the warm lighting, the refined decor, the faint scent of cologne that filled the air. He handed me a glass of wine before I could refuse. One sip turned into two. Two turned into three. Conversation flowed effortlessly. It was light, easy, intoxicating. And then, at some point, he moved closer. His fingertips brushed my wrist. My breath caught. He leaned in, his voice lower now. Cassie, do you want this? I should have said no. I should have walked away. But I didn't. I let him kiss me. I let his hands roam. I let the moment consume me. And when it was over, as I lay tangled in his sheets, my heart still pounding, one terrifying thought whispered in my mind. I don't regret it. That night, I returned home as if nothing had happened. I showered, changed into my pajamas, and slipped into bed next to Ryan. He was already asleep. Good. Because if he had looked into my eyes, he would have seen the truth. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This was the start of something dangerous. And as I stared at the ceiling, guilt gnawing at my chest, I promised myself one last lie. This won't happen again. But deep down, I already knew. I was in too deep to stop. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. I had mastered the art of deception. To Ryan, I was still the devoted wife. The woman who smiled at the dinner table, kissed him goodbye every morning, and laughed at his jokes. But behind closed doors, in secret hotel rooms, and Ethan's sleek condo, I was someone else. Someone reckless. Someone who lived for the thrill. Someone who didn't care about the consequences. But affairs are never without consequences. And the day Ryan found out was the day everything came crashing down. It happened on a Friday evening. I had just left Ethan's condo, my body still buzzing from our time together, when my phone vibrated. A text from Ryan. Ryan. Hey, I got off work early. Thought I'd surprise you at the office, but you weren't there. Where are you? My breath hitched. I had told him I was working late. My fingers trembled as I typed a response. Me. Oh, I had to step out for a bit. Last minute errand? I'll be home soon. The lie came so effortlessly. Too easily. I stuffed my phone in my bag, taking a deep breath before driving home. I thought I had dodged the bullet, but when I walked into our house, Ryan was waiting for me. His expression cold, unreadable. A sinking feeling spread through my chest. Cassie, he said, his voice eerily calm. Where were you? I forced a smile, setting my bag down. I told you, just a quick errand after work. His eyes didn't waver. Funny, because I called your office. My heart stopped. I asked around. No one saw you all day. My mind raced for an excuse, a way out, a way to fix this. But before I could speak, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a stack of photographs. He threw them onto the table, and my world collapsed. Mr. Walking into Ethan's building. Mr. sitting in his car, laughing, Mr. kissing him in front of his door. Ryan had proof. My body turned to ice. Ryan, Stop! He cut me off, his voice sharp, bitter. Don't insult me with your lies. I swallowed hard, my hands shaking. It's not what you think. His laugh was hollow. It's exactly what I think. For the first time in 12 years, I saw something in Ryan's eyes that had never been there before. Hatred. And it terrified me. I broke down, begging, crying, promising him it had meant nothing, that it was just a mistake, that I still loved him. But Ryan just stood there, silent, cold, unmoved. When I reached for him, he stepped back, like my touch disgusted him. You cheated on me, he said, voice dangerously low. And you thought I wouldn't find out? Tears burned my cheeks. It wasn't like that. His jaw clenched. Then explain it to me, Cassie. Explain how you ended up in his bed. Explain how you destroyed our marriage. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. Because there was no excuse. I had betrayed him, and he knew it. Ryan took a deep breath, his hands clenched into fists. Pack your things, he said, voice devoid of emotion. Panic shot through me. Ryan, please. I'm filing for divorce, he continued, ignoring my pleas. And don't even think about fighting it, because if you do, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly why our marriage is over. My stomach dropped. He wasn't just leaving me, he was going to ruin me. And the worst part? I deserved it. 2 days later, I received the divorce papers. Infidelity. A black mark on my name. But that wasn't the worst part. Ryan didn't just want a divorce. He wanted revenge. And he knew exactly how to get it. It started small. People at work began looking at me differently. The whispers, the side glances, the way conversations stopped when I entered a room. Someone had told them, and I knew exactly who it was. Ryan didn't just want to leave me. He wanted to destroy me, and he was succeeding. But that was just the beginning. Because the next move he made was the one that ruined my life. It happened 3 weeks after he found out. I was sitting at my desk, drowning in my own misery, when my phone buzzed. A message from Ethan. Ethan, we need to talk. It's urgent. Confused, I texted back. Me. What's wrong? His reply sent a chill down my spine. Ethan, Ryan sued me for everything I have, and I just lost. My breath hitched. No, this can't be happening. I grabbed my purse, rushed out of the office, and drove straight to Ethan's place. When he opened the door, he looked wrecked, disheveled, sleepless, furious. I lost everything, he growled. Your husband just ruined me. I stared at him, stunned. How? Ethan let out a bitter laugh. He sued me for alienation of affection. It's an actual law in this state, Cassie, and he had all the proof he needed. My stomach twisted. Ryan hadn't just destroyed my life. He had taken Ethan down with me. Jesus, I whispered, my hands shaking. Ethan wasn't done. Oh, and the best part? His voice was dripping with venom. He made sure my company found out. I was fired this morning. No one wants to be associated with me now. I couldn't breathe. This wasn't just divorce. This wasn't just heartbreak. This was complete annihilation. Ryan had won, and I had lost everything. Desperate, I showed up at Ryan's door that night. I pounded on it, tears running down my face, my heart shattered. When he finally answered, his face was completely blank. Ryan, I sobbed, please, we can fix this. We can start over. I made a mistake, but I love you. He stared at me, for a long moment. Then he laughed. A cold, hollow laugh that stabbed through my chest like a knife. "You love me?" he repeated, shaking his head. Then he leaned in, his voice dripping with satisfaction. "Then I hope you remember this moment. Every single time you miss me." With that, he shut the door in my face. And I knew I had lost him forever.